How would my review of Warcraft, written by Duncan Jones, an action-adventure film centered on the battle between humans and orcs as they each fight for their place in the realm of Azeroth. Now, I'm going to begin this review by saying this. If you're somebody who is a fan of the world of Warcraft, not necessarily the game World of Warcraft, but the world of Warcraft, then I think you owe it to yourself to check this movie out, form your own opinion because of what it offers visually. The orcs, the battles, the landscapes have never been all the more realized. As for me, however, I've never played Warcraft, but I have played a little bit of World of Warcraft, and even then I was able to recognize some of these areas, which I have to say was quite cool seeing them come to life. And albeit that I've always been a pretty avid gamer pretty much since birth, the World of Warcraft has never been something that has interested me. Out of all the Blizzard games, in fact, I would say Diablo is my personal pick. But again, to make it clearer, if you're somebody who is a fan of WoW, this is probably something in the realm of a 3.5 to maybe even a 5, because you're probably going to get something out of it that other people who are not fans won't. As for me, if I were to be so bold, even though I don't really put a whole lot of emphasis on the ratings anyway, it's not even at a 2.5. Though that's not to say that Warcraft doesn't try, because it definitely does. I mean, it really does. For me to come in and judge it with such abrasiveness and to have such disdain for the film, I almost kind of feel like an asshole for 3 reasons. One being the director, Duncan Jones. For those who do not know, he is David Bowie's son, and I cannot imagine what he's been through in 2015 as well as this past year, given his father's passing, and for that he has my utmost sympathy. 2, Duncan Jones is an actual World of Warcraft player, so one could easily assume that this is a passion project of his. So for that, Duncan Jones, and maybe to an extent Warcraft, have my utmost respect. And lastly, 3, the fans. The fans have apparently been loving this thing, they think it's great, and have pretty much been bad-mouthing all the critics who believe otherwise. Now, I have read some negative reviews by professional critics that do like reasons as to why they believe the movie to be bad. In other words, some of these reviews are just very wordy ways of saying that the movie sucks. However, as for this review, I'm going to go ahead and say this, that I am not perfect. This is not going to be an in-depth analysis of the film, nor is it going to be an in-depth analysis of the characters or flaws in the characters. But I am going to attempt to give you reasonable reasons why I didn't like the ever so enduring experience that I found Warcraft to be. Before I talk about what I didn't like, I do want to talk about what I did like, and that is the CGI with the orcs, because the orcs look absolutely incredible, and then you have the performance capture underneath it that is very much seamless. And the most notable mocap performance and the most notable performance in the entire film would definitely be Toby Kebbell's as the lead orc, and I would say that most of the stuff that revolves around the orcs exclusively works more than not. I'd also like to add that the CGI environments are very much impressive, maybe not as impressive as the Jungle Books, but still pretty something nonetheless. I also thought the physics of the world, at least dealing with the orcs, I thought were really well done, and I'd be lying if I were to say that I was unimpressed by the action set pieces, the CGI action set pieces. Combine its visual brutality with its crushing sound design, and you have some pretty good spectacle. One last thing that I need to praise this film for is that it's not afraid in the slightest of killing off characters, and that's something that a lot of blockbusters should probably take note of. Granted, I don't know that much about the lore of Warcraft, but from my eyes, it actually takes a few risks, and I think that's quite commendable. So now I want to talk about what I didn't like, and I'm going to start with this. Spectacle hardly ever means a damn thing unless you have characters, an attention-grabbing story, or at least an engaging world. And unfortunately, Warcraft has none of that, or at least it didn't for me. So when it came time for those big set pieces, I cared for absolutely nothing. With maybe, and I do mean just maybe, with the exclusion of the Toby Kebbell character, I didn't give the slightest of a damn about any of the plethora of underdeveloped, uninteresting, and unlikable characters. And the same thing can be said about anything regarding these characters, and I must say the weakest part of this movie by far is anything and everything that revolves around those human characters. It's almost as if the human scenes and the orc scenes were directed by 2 different people. Touching on the performances, there are some that are better than others, but I would say as a whole, they're all relentlessly stale. And there are some that just straight up annoyed me, like Ben Schnitzer, who basically displays variations of stupid face throughout. He plays a young mage in the movie, and I've never seen this actor before, but if I were to base him off of this alone, He's a Razzie Award winner in the making here. Though I suppose I should mention that it may not entirely be his fault or the other actors' faults as well for the subpar acting, because they are forced to deliver their lines with stone faces, given that their lines consist of mostly immensely bland expository dialogue. Look, I get the necessity for having expository dialogue, at least for a film of this type, but that doesn't mean you have to suck out all the color and make the film completely void of fun, right? Again, I haven't played Warcraft, but I have played World of Warcraft, and it's pretty damn cartoony from what I remember. Warcraft is a movie that desperately wants to be taken seriously, and it ends up playing it dry, which I think is a huge mistake, and that's something that a lot of the blockbusters this year alone have done. I'm not saying that I want a lighthearted comedy. I'm not saying that I want something that is as cartoony as the game. I'm just saying that I want something that has life to it. I've said this on more than one occasion, but dryness does not constitute for darkness or seriousness. To maybe put it in better perspective, I'm not sure, but this is the best thing I have right now. It's like taking an orange and completely draining out all the juice till you're left with just pulp. Moreover, it also bears mentioning, and I've already sort of stated this, or at least implied it, that the story itself, not all that captivating, and honestly, we've seen it done before, orcs versus humans, and I mean by done before, we've seen it done before better. Lord of the Rings. Now my next problem is something that you probably knew I was going to have when you clicked on this video, and yes, it is relative to the CGI. And it's not enough for the production design and the set design to look overly pristine and too plastic-like, or the cinematography. Granted, I'm no expert, but whether it's the framing or the overall direction, the cinematography looks downright uninspired and amateurish in some areas. Not only does the cinematography lack creativity, at least when characters are interacting with one another, but it just looks damn cheap. I mean, honestly, it looks like a fan film. And with $160 million, this movie is anything but cheap. But getting back to the point that I was about to make that is relative to the CGI, the CGI itself, as I've already stated, I think it looks great. When the orcs and humans are at battle, oddly enough, it doesn't look that bad, presumably because everything is moving so fast to where you don't have time to fully digest everything. However, it's when the actors are standing around blue screen, not green screen, but blue screen, is when things just kind of started to remind me a little bit of Star Wars, and I'm not talking about the good ones. Granted, I haven't seen the worst of the worst, but with a movie of this budget, this is one of the worst green screen effects that I've seen in a movie that is post-2010. Honestly, I believe this movie would have been more convincing if it were just entirely CG'd. As for any last words, some of the editing was a little off, especially with the fades towards the beginning, but it does get better. This movie also contains a social commentary, that of course being racism, and it's commendable. It's not something that I think is a driving force to go see this movie, though, in my opinion. Overall, I know that there are people out there who have seen this movie and they absolutely adore it, and I'm not trying to detract anyone's enjoyment from this movie. That was never my intention by making this video. And I say this without any kind of condescendence. The movie worked for you, it didn't for me. Being somebody who's been a gamer pretty much since birth, I want to see more video game movies. More specifically, I want to see better video game movies. If Warcraft is any indication of how video game movies are going to be in the future, then I must say the future of video game movies is still bleak. So with that said, I'm going to give Warcraft a very light 2 out of 5. If you're somebody who has seen Warcraft, then do let me know your thoughts on it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know. As always, I'm Colin Kirkland, and thank you so much for watching.